So again, hello everyone, and welcome to this second webinar in the Business Action for Women, Peace and Security series. My name is Carla. I work as Social Sustainability and Integrity Project Manager at UN Global Compact Network UK, and I will be moderating this session. If you attended the first webinar in the series, then you will know that this session was more of an introductory one that explained how the Women, Peace and Security, or WPS agenda, relates to businesses worldwide and why it should matter to the private sector. And today we are taking a slightly more in-depth approach. So we will be taking a look at practical examples of business projects and initiatives contributing to the WPS agenda. And we have a brilliant speaker lineup to help us with that. But before I introduce our guest speakers, I just want to let you know that if attendees you're having any technical difficulties, please feel free to let me know about this through the chat box, which should be at the bottom of your screens, and I'll do my best to help. And if for some reason you're having issues joining the audio and listening to the webinar via your computer, then you can also join by phone via the dial-in details we sent you today. And in addition to the chat box, this webinar also features a Q&A box. So as attendees, you will not be able to unmute yourselves. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to send them in through the Q&A box at any time. And our panelists will then answer those questions at the end. So as I mentioned earlier, we have 3 guest speakers today. So before we dive into their presentations, let me just briefly introduce everyone. First one on the screen, we have Alice. Alice is the CEO of Committed to Good, or CTG, which is a company assisting clients in 25 fragile and conflict-affected countries with specialized recruitment, HR management, and operational services. Alice leads by example to ensure that women play a broader role in humanitarian projects in high-risk environments by spearheading the Female First initiative, which she will talk about today. Alice has 14 years of experience managing projects in challenging environments, and she's a vocal advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals, having been a 2018 SDG pioneer for women's empowerment in conflict settings and a 2019 Oslo Business for Peace honoree. On the line today, we also have Joyce, dialing in from Angola, and who works in the Department of Social Responsibility of BP Angola. Joyce will be talking to us about BP Angola's support for the 100 Women in Demining project by the British landmine clearance charity, the Halo Trust, and how this initiative has helped empower local women and provide more safety and security for local communities. And she will also be talking about BP's support for local agribusiness with a special focus on gender-balanced farmers cooperatives. And last but certainly not least, we have Brita, who serves as Executive Director of Women for Women International UK, which is a humanitarian organization that provides skills, knowledge, and resources that create sustainable change for women survivors of war, their families, and their communities. Brita is an advocate and promoter of women's empowerment, women's rights, and equality. And she has led several influential women's organizations and networks, including as chair of Gender Action for Peace and Security, or as you may know them, GAPS. So this is our agenda for today. After a brief overview of the UN Global Compact Network UK, which will be presented by our Executive Director, Steve Kenzie, and a short introduction to the WPS agenda for those of you who may be unfamiliar with it, our 3 panelists will take the floor. And finally, in the last 15 minutes of the event, they will answer any questions you may have. So as I said, please feel free to send your questions through the Q&A box at any time during this webinar. So without further ado, Steve, over to you.
Thank you very much, Carla. It's a pleasure to be joining you today. I'm going to be very brief because I hope we have some familiarity already with UN Global Compact. So it's the 20th anniversary of Global Compact, the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, and we at the UK network are part of that initiative, connecting companies and other organizations in a global movement dedicated to driving sustainable growth. The essence of the Global Compact are 10 universal principles derived from UN treaties in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. To join us, to be a part of this movement, your CEO needs to make 3 commitments. Firstly, to operationalize the 10 principles throughout your business, to report annually on the progress you're making towards doing that, and thirdly, to support the wider UN development agenda. And of course, that's left somewhat undefined, but at the moment for us, certainly that's a big part of that is the Sustainable Development Goals. But the Women, Peace and Security agenda obviously is also features prominently there. We are one of 68 local networks around the world, so wherever you're located, there's probably a local network that you could be engaging with, and I encourage you to check us out. Very much looking forward to hearing from Alice and Joyce and Brita now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Short and sweet. So as I said, so I'm aware that some of you may be more familiar with the WPS agenda than others. So very briefly, we'll go over some key information to get everyone on the same page and also to explain the idea behind the series. So the reason why this series came to be is because 2020 marks the 20th anniversary of the UN Global Compact, as well as the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, which effectively established the Women, Peace and Security agenda. But despite the progress that both initiatives have done over the last 2 decades, the links between the two still remain somewhat underexplored. So this event aims to continue the conversation we started last month at the first event in the series about how businesses can make positive contributions to the WPS agenda. So as I mentioned, this agenda was initiated by the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, and this to this day remains a landmark resolution that underscores the importance of having a gender perspective on peace and security. And since this moment, many civil society organizations and activists around the world have been advocating for its full implementation. And the Security Council has passed 9 more resolutions in the WPS framework. And in addition, a growing number of countries around the world have implemented national action plans for implementing 1325. And each year in October, the UN Secretary General submits a report to the Security Council on progress made on its implementation. The WPS agenda is also often described in terms of 4 pillars, which are participation, prevention, protection, and relief and recovery. So participation focuses on full and equal participation and representation of women at all levels of decision making, while prevention is about incorporating a gender perspective and the participation of women in preventing the emergence, spread, and re-emergence of violent conflict. Protection is about addressing specific protection rights and needs of women and girls in conflict and post-conflict settings, while relief and recovery focuses on access to health services and counseling. But I think I'll stop there for now and pass the word to our first guest speaker for the day, Joyce. Joyce, the floor is yours. Looking very much forward to hearing more about BP Angola's projects in this space.
Carla, thank you so much. And thank you so much for everybody that's on the line. As Carla said, Joyce Jones, the Sustainable Development Manager for BP Angola, and really is a pleasure to be able to share some of our examples of how we support the Global Impact Agenda. Is this moving on its own, Carla, or are you moving the slides for me? That's fantastic. And really our agenda focus heavily on projects that are related to education for primary and high school, enterprise development, heavy focus on agricultural farming, and also the health initiatives that take into account issues that are related to maternal child health. All of those 3 areas are underpinned by a focus theme that ensures that all of these programs take into account issues that are relating to environment, security, and capacity building for people that take part or indirect impacted communities that will benefit from those projects. You can move, please. So as some of you may have seen last month, given our new strategy and a new ambition within BP, we launched a new framework that has 3 key priorities. And I really just wanted to highlight that just to show how integral what we do in the social sphere has to do with our core values. So as many of you have heard, you know, some of our key ambition, some of our key aims till 2050 is to really become an energy company, a net zero energy company, and help the world and the regions that we operate do so as well. And as we do that, we need to make sure that we take care of the environment and that our operations are safe and are reliable, and that the communities that live around our operations know what we do and are able to feed back the impact that what we do has on them, with the positive and the negative as well, and work with us in mitigating those impacts, the positives and the negatives. And the third aspect, which is really what this presentation is about, is really making sure that we improve people's lives. So lives of those that work for the organization and the communities that we operate. And I believe, and we believe, that those ambitions go beyond the UN agenda, which goes to 2030. And we want to make sure that whatever comes after that, we as a company are aligned with protecting the environment, taking care of our people, and making sure that we protect our environment as well. So you can move to the next one. Just a quick highlight in terms of our operations in Angola. BP operates 2 blocks and is partnered in 4 other projects. And our responsibilities and our operations are responsible for about 15% of the country's oil production. So our activities here are still heavily linked with carbohydrate, the extraction of oil and gas. But we have a workforce that is heavily national, so 88% of our workforce is Angola nationals. And we make sure that we also support the government agenda for local, in ensuring that local suppliers are part of the supply chain of our businesses. So in the last 15 years, we spent around 370 million on those contracts and working with local suppliers. And within the same time, we have spent about 100 million on social projects, investing on social projects, 2 of which we are going to highlight here. We can move to the next session. So the first one, the first project that I wanted to highlight is an agribusiness project. So BP has been working on this initiative with local farmers since 2005. If some of you don't know the context within Angola, Angola is a country that it comes from a civil war background. We had 27 years of civil war, and prior to that, colonization. And the civil war ended in 2002. And in 2005, we started this initiative. And really, we wanted to make sure that we supported communities or provinces that the agricultural sector had a great potential. So Bengala and Wambo are provinces where the agricultural sector has great potential. Yet around that time, communities, local farmers had a lot of issues with access to IDs. They didn't have IDs to make sure that they registered their opportunities. They didn't have awareness of the financial system to be able to know how to apply for grants. And so our partnership with ADRA, which is a local NGO, ensured that we started working with 100 small farmers. And really the objective was to ensure that they organized themselves, ensure that they knew what kind of products were most profitable I wouldn't say most profitable, what kind of products were most appropriate to cultivate in those areas. That really, the local farmers are the experts, to be honest with you. But the fact that at that time they were working as in their family units, it didn't really help them to expand. And so the initiative came together and brought farmers in those two provinces together to ensure that they organize themselves into cooperatives. And in organizing themselves into cooperatives, some of the funding that we provided, the community groups actually created a microcredit system where they didn't need to rely on the banks. They could supply credits to other farmers that were not part of the cooperative yet. So we started this with 1,000 cooperatives initially in 2005, and this has grown immensely. The initial funding that we provided was for 5 years, and it was 2.5 million. And this 2.5 million was to ensure that they managed to acquire the right machinery, they managed to acquire the right crops, they managed to get the right education in how they could produce, they managed to set up contract with supermarkets outside of their regional areas, and right now is actually grown into them being able to export to other regions. And so those initial 10 cooperatives were able to then, after the initial fund, support not just farming businesses, but small enterprises as well. For example, in those areas, we now have around 100, and in Angola we call it canteens, which is small supermarkets that people are able to sell things like school books, sell things like milk that are not coming from, I wouldn't say milk, so school books, pens, other small enterprises have set up small I'm trying to find the word in Portuguese, small butcheries. I don't know what the word in English is, but really the last 15 years or so, 1,000 cooperatives have grown into 4,000 cooperatives, helping over 10,000 people. And of those 10,000 people, 50% of them are women. And as you can see in some of those images, and it's so great when we go into the field, the men say, we want the women to take care of all the financial and all the administrative aspects of the cooperatives, because they do it so much better. They make sure that the returns are there. They make sure that we follow the timelines and the deadlines that we need to pursue. And they're also better negotiators. So when the cooperatives gather themselves and go and negotiate deals with big supermarkets to export their products, they say that the women are the best negotiators. And so right now, the initiative is going all the way up to 2025. We've put in the last 5 years, another 1.5 million. And this 1.5 million will help to support 6 new cooperatives. These 6 new cooperatives will estimately support another 1,000 families going forward. I think you can move this one. So this project, as you guys can see, our expertise, our field knowledge in these 2 provinces, back in 2017, one of the no, I wouldn't say complaints, but one of the highlights that we had from our visits was the fact that the cooperatives wanted to expand their production, but some of the areas that they wanted to expand to were deemed to have landmines. And so we, at the time, didn't really know a lot about demining in Angola. We knew that Angola had an agenda to become landmine free by 2025. Yet, when we started to engage with the Halo Trust to understand the scope, we realized that a lot of work was still to be done. So as you see on your left side, so this is the map of Angola, and the areas highlighted in blue are the areas where the Halo Trust has been working since 1994 to clear the suspected landmines, which are highlighted by the dots in red. So everything in red are suspected landmines. This photograph was taken just last month in September. So you can see that Angola has a huge problem, and we only highlight in the provinces that Halo Trust is working on. The other provinces have been supported by other NGOs, but even just looking at the left side of the country, we quickly realized that it would be very difficult for the government to meet those deadlines without additional support. And in addition to that, the Halo Trust had an initiative that was very much targeting towards women and in women empowerment, and ensuring that women were not discriminated into joining the sector, and that they felt that they could contribute not just with farming, but with getting training to becoming, demining team leaders, administrators, medical supervisors, doing anything that from logistics to actually doing the demining work. So we thought that the initiative was very interesting. And because the Halo Trust had already managed to clear one of the provinces that we worked in, which was Wambo, we thought it would be great to create a network where we could, by 2023, for Benguela province, where we have these farmers cooperatives, that Benguela province became landmine free. So this initiative started in 2019, and it's going to go all the way up to 2023. And the idea is to ensure that for that province, we encourage women to getting working in demining. We encourage women to participate on the local forums that exist, and we help them to bring their voice, and we help return about 338 acres of land back into to farming, back into land that can be used for building schools, building clinics, building homes. And the cooperatives that we're helping are able to expand the areas that they are working in. So we saw that the two initiatives focused on ensuring that women's rights and women's ability to enter the work market, women experience in the workplace, making sure that they are able to work in different areas, not just the traditional areas, was very much reflected and was very much an integral part of those initiatives. So the two initiatives support 4 of the Sustainable Development Goals and are very much alive and are very much progressing. And BP is very, very proud to work with NGOs like ADRA and NGOs like the Halo Trust here in Angola. And we are really advancing, and we are really working to make sure that Benguela by 2023 becomes landmine free. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Joyce. That was a fascinating presentation. And if you as attendees have any questions for Joyce, I see that we already have one. Just feel free to send them through Q&A or through the chat box, and then we'll take those questions at the end. But for now, over to you, Alice.
Thank you very much. Joyce, I actually know about your program with Halo Trust. It's amazing. I hadn't actually realized that BP was the corporate partner. We work on a number of mine action programs, so actually know Halo Trust very well. It's really incredible the work you're doing there. Anyway, thank you very much, Carla, and the Global Compact UK Network for your kind invitation. It's my absolute pleasure to be with you all today. So I better start by saying my name is Alice Law. I'm the CEO of Committed to Good, but we're better known as CTG. I have the privilege of meeting many local women in conflict settings. And when you hear from men and women the true stories, particularly in Arab states, and what goes on during conflict, then it becomes clear why the women, peace and security agenda is actually so important. But for us, it's also about making a difference. Sorry, probably going to go to the next slide. I'll start by telling a little bit briefly about what CTG does. We enable humanitarian projects in fragile and conflict-affected countries, whether it's monitoring the movement of migrants in Libya, running Ebola treatment clinics, or managing complex food distribution projects in Sudan, or building schools in Afghanistan. Our staff actually go to the most dangerous and most vulnerable communities. CTG's purpose wholeheartedly resides within these conflict settings and the communities within which we work. We have around 4,000 staff working for us, and the nature of our work means that we have the ability to improve women's access to decent work opportunities in the countries and the communities that we work. And that's exactly what we're striving to do. So could I have the next slide, please? So where did CTG's gender equality journey start? It was in Gaza in 2015, actually, when I was talking to one of our staff, a lady called Salwa Nasser. Salwa is a Palestinian woman and civil engineer who works for us on a project which monitors the use of construction materials. And Salwa pointed out to me that I was in a unique position to support women who, like her, face many complex challenges of being not only a woman, but also living in a war-torn country. And Salwa's comment resonated with me and opened my eyes to the fact that CTG could enact change for women living in these conflict settings. In Gaza, as in many other of the countries that we work in, asymmetrical gender relations and rife discrimination restricts women's rights, their freedoms and their dignity. And in particular in labour markets where women often aren't allowed to work in a man's job. So not long after I met Salwa, the SDGs were launched, and these provided CTG with a clear sort of framework for what we needed to do to take action. We already knew we wanted to champion gender equality, so integrating SDG 5 into our operations was actually relatively easy. But looking at the other SDGs, it was also evident that goal 8 and 16 were also very aligned with our business and our values, our corporate values. So since then, we've kind of deliberately woven the 3 SDGs into our corporate DNA. Next slide, please. The SDGs encourage you to be innovative and creative, and we knew we could make a difference. So it was that really encouraged us to launch Female First. We didn't intend to set out with an agenda that aligned with the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We started with something we were passionate about, which was gender equality, and our agenda evolved to align with the pillars of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Female First pledges to create job opportunities for women in conflict-affected countries, aligned with SDGs 5, 8 and 16, and has a goal of 30% of all of our project-related roles will be represented by women by 2030. There are 4 key elements that underpin Female First, and if we could flip to the next slide, please. We have our recruitment initiative, our career development program, Women in Aid, which is an internship program, and the UN Women's Empowerment Principles. But our recruitment initiative is the actual primary driver of Female First. When we launched Female First, we actually had around 50% female representation in our core staff, but we only had 6% representation in our project-related roles. And as at the end of 2019, we reached 18%. But in a number of the conflict-affected countries we work, where similar to Joyce, we actually hire 90% local staff. We've actually reached close to 30%. We're very close to our goal, particularly in Somalia and Afghanistan. Our female candidates on our database has also increased dramatically by 667% since 2016. We now have nearly 10,000 female candidates on our database. The biggest challenge is ensuring women are not only represented forward, but are also selected as the best candidate. Although parity in representation is a key first step in addressing gender inequality, ensuring meaningful participation also requires dismantling structural barriers that hinder women's access to employment. And CTG faces challenges that hinder women's access at every stage of our recruitment process. And these are barriers that have to be overcome in order for us to see valuable progress towards gender equality. People often talk about unconscious bias, but it's actually conscious bias that is one of the problems that we face most. And we were asked by a client who I will remain anonymous to source a candidate for them for a specific position in Afghanistan. And they said it has to be a male candidate. And so we challenged them and we said, why? And they said, oh, because the man has to work the candidate has to work overtime. We said, well, an Afghan woman would be just as happy to work overtime. And they said, oh no, I'm afraid we can't because the women all have a 4 o'clock bus that they take home. Women must be recognized as valuable economic participants rather than a vulnerable group of beneficiaries who need a 4 p.m. bus home. And it's really disappointing when we face this kind of conscious bias, because employing women in decent work is transformative, but also a gender diverse workforce provides invaluable benefits across any sector, and especially when it comes to the delivery of humanitarian aid. One of the projects we run, for example, in Somalia is a food aid program, and 80% of the beneficiaries are women and children. So this is a project where we try and have as many female candidates actually working on the project because they are somewhat better equipped to communicate with our beneficiaries. So could I have a next slide, please? So since Female First has launched, it's kind of evolved, and we're also doing what we can to support younger women entering the workforce. We do this through 2 initiatives, our Female First Career Development Workshop and our Women in Aid Internship and Mentoring Program. The Career Development Program trains young women residing in conflict-affected countries with skills and knowledge to help them enter into the labour market. For example, how to write a strong CV, conducting a good job interview, or even writing a good cover letter. The career development workshops were actually launched in Gaza in 2018 and in Somalia last year. And the programme commits to offer 10% with an internship under our Women in Aid programme, either with CTG or with one of our public or private sector partners. It has a fundamental objective to provide young women with tangible work experience opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. And I've been so impressed by some of the graduates of this programme. Next slide, please. So the 4th pillar is the UN Women's Empowerment Principles. And as we heard during the first webinar, the WEPS is a platform which you can engage with under the UN Global Compact. And the WEPS is a set of 7 principles, but I like to think of them as 7 steps that businesses can adopt to empower women in the workplace, marketplace, and community. WEPS is really important to CTG, and since we made our public commitment in 2017, we've actually integrated the adherence to the principles in our policies and operations. And in addition, we have championed gender equality within both our organisation, but also advocated for the WEPS in the wider business community, both in the UAE, where I live most of the time, and now in conflict-affected countries. We leveraged our influence to get 16 Somalia-based companies to publicly commit to the WEPs at our 2019 Committed to Good Summit in Mogadishu. And this was the first time I had actually tried to engage with private sector organizations in one of our operational countries on the matter of gender equality. And what I found extremely interesting is how an initiative as simple as the WEPs can be so invaluable in communities of conflict by providing an excuse to kind of start a conversation surrounding women's empowerment. And these discussions actually inspired us to publish a white paper on women's access to employment in fragile affected countries. And the last slide, please. So finally, I just quickly want to mention another of our initiatives, which kind of complements Female First and further advances our commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment in conflict settings. And that's CTG Giving. In 2018, CTG Giving established a partnership with the Elman Peace and Human Rights Foundation with the objective to empower female survivors of gender-based violence in Somalia. We ran a 1-month entrepreneurship training for 13 students at a victim support center in Mogadishu. In keeping with our vision to cultivate leadership and empower the marginalized brackets of society, we provided a grant for a winning entrepreneur to kickstart their business. I had the privilege of actually personally meeting these ladies at the shelter, and not only was I mesmerized by their positivity, their ambition, their courage, and such remarkable strength of women who face adversity every day, but I'm actually sure that CTG Giving has helped change the future for these women. That's it for me, Carla.
Thank you so much, Alice, for a very, very comprehensive presentation in only 10 minutes. We will send you the link to CTG's white paper in the follow-up email in case you wanted to check it out in more detail. But for now, we'll pass it on to Brita for our final presentation of the day. Brita, over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Joyce and Alice. I really enjoyed that, and I think this is such a great event, really bringing together quite different people, because I have a different perspective yet again, and I think that's really powerful, and it reminds us just how big this world is and how there is something that each of us can do to advance the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So I am the Executive Director for Women International, which is an organization, an international development organization that bridges the international development arena with the humanitarian arena, I guess, because we work with the most marginalized and socially excluded women in countries affected by extreme poverty and conflict. And what we do is we principally help women to go through a year-long program that is aimed at achieving 4 key outcomes: that women are well, that women know their rights and use their voice, that they have social networks and support mechanisms, and lastly, and obviously very importantly, that they can earn and sustain an income. And we do provide women with a cash stipend and support them to save money and increase their financial literacy. We also implement a men's engagement program as a complementary service, because we know how important it is to obviously work with the wider community so that they can support the empowerment of women. And we've also recently started to implement a change agent program where we provide additional training to particularly engaged and vocal women who come out of the year-long program and who want to use their newly gained confidence and agency to create a change in the community around them. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. And then obviously we also feel a moral obligation to use the access that we have to the data and the information that we gather from the incredible women that we work with, to use that to raise awareness and influence policy using that data. And because our reach is, we feel quite vast. We've helped over 500,000 women in the last 25 years and reached about 12,000 women, who really are the women who under the SDGs are often referred to as, at greatest risk of being left behind. And so that's in a nutshell what Women for Women International does in general. And now a little bit more about what we do specifically around the Women, Peace and Security agenda. As Carla said, I am the chair of the network called Gender Action for Peace and Security, which is a network of 17 humanitarian and development and women's rights organizations engaged in the Women, Peace and Security agenda in the UK. We play a leading role in setting the strategy and the direction of the network, and we also co-chair a policy working group that is the lead for the development of the annual shadow report, which assesses the UK government's actions against their commitments to their national action plan. For those of you who don't know, the national action plans are basically what countries commit to around how they implement the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 that Carla mentioned at the beginning. So I've also historically worked quite closely with the government as an advisor on important issues relating to women, peace and security. As an organisation, we have consistently influenced the UK government's policy and practice on women, peace and security. And this has ranged from conducting consultation processes in conflict-affected countries such as Afghanistan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Nigeria to inform the UK National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. And more recently, we have been contributing to research around the impact of COVID-19 on women, peace and security and making recommendations for action to the international community. As an organisation, we are absolutely committed to supporting women affected by conflict to participate in the decisions that impact their lives, because obviously this is principle, as you saw, is a principal theme and central theme, in fact, to the Women, Peace and Security agenda. And we aim to do this in a number of ways. And one example that I mentioned earlier is our Change Agents program, which is an innovative grassroots leadership and advocacy training program that provides women with the skills, knowledge and support to use their unique leadership skills, their resilience and their experience to create the changes that they want to see in their communities and beyond. So really addressing the subject around obviously participation, which is a key pillar of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We've also done a huge amount of work alongside the GAPS network to further strengthen meaningful mechanisms for how you can engage with women affected by conflict. So notably in 2019, Women for Women International was a lead partner in the Beyond Consultation project. And there is a website that you can look at. It's www.beyondconsultation.org that gives you more information. But in a nutshell, what we did is we produced a practical tool designed to support actors to move towards a more meaningful engagement with women in fragile and conflict-affected states in response to the feedback that many consultation exercises tended to be extractive, tokenistic, and disempowering. So this tool has since been endorsed by key stakeholders, including the UK and US government and UN Women. And it is really a fantastically helpful tool that has been developed directly in consultation with local women's organizations. So I really recommend you having a look at that. We have also just recently, just to give you an example of how that direct connection with the UK government in action is, we've recently been asked by a representative of the UK government to feed into research that they're doing on how they might support Afghan women's meaningful participation in the peace process. And so we're trying to build that bridge between the women that we work with and the governments that we're trying to influence. Just a point around improving coordination and collaboration across sectors, and this is something that you have already, both of you actually mentioned, and my fellow speakers mentioned, their focus on SDGs and women, peace and security, and the obviously the important interconnections. And at Women for Women International, we know that for women affected by conflict, their lives are not dictated by a superficial compartmentalization of sectors, right? Their needs are interconnected, and we really feel quite strongly about the international community's responsibility to put women first and ensure that they are coordinating effectively to meet the varying needs that women have. And so in our recent organizational agenda for action, which we launched in March of this year, we identified an urgent priority to increase the coordination and improve gender and conflict-focused synergies across the development, humanitarian, peace building and security sectors to ensure that they better reflect the realities of women's lives on the ground, as it were, in the countries affected by conflict. And we have made this a central part of our global engagement with like-minded organizations, as well as governments, donors, and UN agencies. And we've stepped up our role as a policy convener to break down silos and bring together influential partners across this triple nexus, as it is often referred to. So now I'm going to get onto my slide that you have been admiring. So obviously all of this work is only possible through a number of different donors and partners that we work with. And a key part of the partners that we work with come from the business sector. And there are many. So we work with, Net-a-Porter, we work with Swarovski, with Jimmy Choo, with Monica Vinada, and also with Charlotte Tilbury, which is the example that I wanted to highlight in my talk today. So first of all, Charlotte Tilbury herself obviously is, she's right there in the first picture with me. She is the founder, president and chairman and creative officer of Charlotte Tilbury Beauty, which is the business. And she has been a supporter of Women for International since 2014. She then very shortly afterwards became an ambassador for the organization. And she uses her platform to raise the voices of women that we serve and shine a light on the issues faced by women in some of the world's most fragile states, and reaching audiences that probably would normally not hear about the situation for women that we work with. Charlotte Tilbury Beauty contributes to the Women, Peace and Security agenda by raising both funds and awareness around our work with women survivors of war, helping women to enroll in our year-long training program, many of who will in turn often become entrepreneurs. So Charlotte Tilbury recently, about a year and a half ago, made a £1 million pledge. And through that pledge, she is funding our programs in Iraq, in Rwanda, and in Nigeria. And with Charlotte Tilbury's support, Women for International was able to launch our holistic program in a new location in northern Iraq, where we serve internally displaced women, as well as Syrian refugees, as well as the Yazidi women who you may have heard about, who were abducted in 2014 during the Sinjar massacre by ISIS. And so as many of them are actually still being held as sex slaves, but many have been able to flee, and it is those women that we have been serving. Charlotte Tilbury is also one of the first funders of our brand new initiative called the Innovation Fund. Now, this is obviously incredibly important for organizations, the ability to be flexible, to learn from the experiences from the women, to learn from our monitoring and evaluation, and enable us to respond and innovate and try new things and continue to pilot and drive special projects beyond our core program. And so also during the COVID-19 pandemic, which obviously has uprooted all of our lives in many ways and changed the reality for obviously the women that we serve who depend on a daily income. And I was talking to Joyce earlier, the impact that it has when you're in lockdown and you have no social support and no infrastructure, and you can no longer leave your home, is extremely challenging. And my colleague in northern Iraq recently said to me, you choose between a slow death by hunger or a fast death by going out and exposing yourself to the risk of being infected by COVID. And we were able to use the support that Charlotte Tilbury gives us and continue to provide cash stipends to women during lockdown, which meant that they were able to eat and also provide hygiene kits to women and their families, as well as face masks to women in Rwanda. And then importantly, Our team, the way we approach these partnerships is very holistic, and we've worked very closely with the team, with the staff teams on various activities, including staff talks, bi-monthly social media support, events, and kind of around our campaigns, and engaging both staff and consumers with the work of Women for Women International and the impact of the £1 million pledge. And just to finish, I've been reflecting on this, and I really think this is such an important subject. And as an individual, I guess, who's been in conversation with businesses for many years now, exploring how they can make a difference in countries that are the ones who are at greatest risk of being left behind, because they are at the crossroads of extreme poverty and fragility. I know how hard it is to make the business case when it comes to those countries, right? Because they are not yet countries where businesses want to invest. So we need to paint the larger picture that tells us that unless we address women, peace and security and the agenda and support those countries, we will not achieve the growth and prosperity that we aim for globally, because we know that poverty breeds insecurity, and insecurity affects us all. So when businesses like Charlotte Tilbury and Swarovski and many others invest directly in women, peace and security, they are investing in the long term. They are approaching their impact in a serious and inspiring manner, and in turn, they are rewarded because consumers more and more are aware of short-term self-interest versus long-term collective interest. And our commitment as an organization, obviously, is to effectively communicate about the impact and the change that is created, and to do so at an individual and at a community level, because companies are made up of individuals who are staff and who want to feel motivated by the company that they work for, and who want to be able to connect with the social impact that the company is creating. You can tell I'm very passionate about this, so there is much more that I could say, but I'm going to stop here. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about this important subject.
Thank you very much, Brita, for the presentation. I think that was, again, very, very holistic in these short 10 minutes we gave each one of you. And yeah, I think that this last bit where you said that investing in women, peace and security is a serious long-term investment is really what we are trying to showcase with this series. So thank you very much for that. We did receive a few questions while you were presenting. So I think I'm just going to start with the first question that came through for Joyce. So one of our attendees would like to know how the Greater Plutonio Agribusiness Project is aligned to BP's business objectives, or is this just a work that BP does for the community? Joyce, over to you.
Thank you so much for the question. As I said in one of the slides in my presentation, it's aligned with our core value of ensuring that we, as well as our standard operations, that we support the agenda for development and community growth in the countries where we operate. And so that initiative is at the heart of that. And the government of Angola has a heavy agenda of diversifying the Angolan economy. The Angola economy is 85% funded by the oil sector. And so the government is really working very hard to make sure that other sectors of the country develop to ensure that there's a greater diversification, and agriculture is a major part of it. 50% of the Angolan land can be used for agriculture. And so that's one of our key drives for funding this initiative.
Thank you very much, Joyce. We also have a question for Alice, but I think it can equally be for Brita. So what advice can you give to a private sector organization on how to start supporting the women, peace and security agenda? Where should a company begin? So Alice, happy for you to take this.
So I think it's a bit of a cheat when one of your own staff actually asks a question, but I didn't prompt her to do that. But it is a very, very good question. And it depends whether you are looking at CSR or whether you're looking at philanthropy. I mean, Brita's given a very good idea, if you've got money and want to be a philanthropist, of ways you can invest that. At CTG, we actually take a shared value approach to our social responsibility and social impact. And, you know, we work in the humanitarian sphere. We do not have big budgets to do wonderful ideas like Women for Women International do. But for us, we had to identify our sphere of influence and where we could have the biggest impact. And it really is in the countries that we work in. And looking at the SDGs, you know, there are all these events globally, and there's an awful lot of talk about things that need to happen. And we actually realize that we go right into the communities and the places that we work in, and that we can get the message to them. And through advocacy, doing things like our Committed to Good Summit, which is a summit we hold every year. We've held one in Gaza, we've held one in Mogadishu, in partnership with the local government in Mogadishu, actually looking at the National Action Plan for the SDGs, Brita, which you mentioned, and engaging the private sector and getting the private sector to the table and having that discussion with them, to involve them into the conversation and to encourage innovation and creativity. So yeah, if you don't have big budgets, you need to be innovative, you need to be creative, you need to identify where you can have the biggest impact. And, you know, supporting women's voices is actually really, really important. And this is how we use our voice in a way.
Thank you very much, Alice. Brita, happy for you to take this question if you have any input.
I mean, you know, it's such a big question, isn't it? And I actually really always, when I talk to businesses, I always talk about actually what Alice said in terms of shared value. And really understanding your business integrity and you know, then asking yourself, you know, what can you do, what makes sense for you, and what do your staff think? That's you know, and obviously staff and customers, so it has to make sense with who you are as a business. And you know, and I obviously believe that it's exciting to be the business that isn't going for the obvious, but is going for something that perhaps you can't directly use, as it were, to further your business interests. That it is genuinely there for the greater good of the world, as it were, because I think obviously I know a lot of businesses who go where they think their markets can expand, and they invest there in order to create markets for them, and you know, in the shorter term, whereas obviously we're looking at when we look at women, peace and security, we're looking at a longer term vision and an investment in the greater good. And so obviously that is going to appeal hopefully to businesses who are perhaps more entrepreneurial and who you know, who actually believe in a visionary approach to their kind of social corporate responsibility. And that can be really exciting, and you can really write on that. So I think those are kind of some of the thoughts and experiences that I've had.
Thank you, Brita. So in sum, really, be creative and be visionary. And I think one of the other things that sort of weaves through all of these three presentations we heard today is that you should also take advantage of the local expertise and the NGOs really working in these spaces, whether it's the Halo Trust, whether it's Women for Women International, but do make these connections, because they will all contribute to the women, peace and security agenda if you leverage them, and they will also contribute to SDGs 16 and 17 if you really work on them. I think we are just out of time, so I do apologize for any questions we will not be taking today, but thank you all for sending them in. And I would encourage you all to do some more research by yourselves on all of these wonderful projects we heard about today. I will be following up with an email with the recording of this session and all the materials that our panelists have been talking about today. So yeah, thank you very much to all of you, Joyce, Alice and Brita. Thank you all our wonderful attendees today. And I hope you have a lovely day and a lovely week ahead.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye. Bye, Alice. Bye, Brita. Nice to meet you.
Bye. Bye.